Good morning, beautiful Streatham. May I speak in the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. 18 months ago, Pat and I visited Israel, Palestine. We had 10 days travelling around the West Bank, meeting wonderful Palestinian people and hearing often disturbing stories about their life under occupation. The trip was unforgettable in so many ways and packed with beautiful but also painful memories. This unconventional pilgrimage was called A Taste of Palestine, and oh my goodness, it proved to be a feast on so many levels. A highlight was our visit to the Aida refugee camp in Bethlehem, where we were each assigned to cook a meal with a family. So wonderful. On our journey up north, we stopped in a village near Nablus to check out a fairly traded vineyard. Within minutes of arriving in the village, a woman who had absolutely no idea who we were emerged from a house with several children laden with freshly baked bread and jugs of coffee. We were, as I say, unexpected visitors to the village, but then this was typical of the spontaneous hospitality to which we were treated all over. So there we were, a mixed bunch of religious and non religious travellers being served what felt, for me at least anyway, like an unconventional form of communion from a Muslim family with whom we shared no common language apart from smiles and fellow human gestures, of which there were many. It was as if Christ himself, in the form of this woman and her children, fed our spirits as well as our bodies. And I left with the words of today's gospel swirling around my head. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Now, these words are the climax of a passage in Matthew in which Jesus commissions the disciples to go forth with a message of healing and deliverance. And I love the inclusiveness in what he said. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. It seems to suggest an invisible, unconscious fellowshipping with God embedded in every act of hospitality, even the simple gift of a cup of cold water. In Mark's rendering of this passage, the disciples tell Jesus that they saw someone casting out demons in his name, so they tried to stop him. Because he wasn't one of us, they said. Jesus tells them, in effect, don't be so blinking daft. Whoever is not against us is for us. And you know, in my experience, if there's one thing that really turns people off religion, it's the kind of narrow dogmatism that says, we're the ones, we've got the truth, everyone else is wrong, join us or else. But Jesus understands the relationship between the power of monopoly and the monopoly of power. And the quickest way to undermine aspirations to social or religious control is to keep the definitions of belonging ultimately fluid and inclusive, which is what Jesus did with his disciples. I grew up in Liverpool, a city that was very divided in those days between Catholics and Protestants. A bit like Belfast or Glasgow, there would be constant conflict between the communities, especially on those days when the Orange Lodge bands marched through the Catholic districts, waving their banners and playing Protestant anthems, basically saying, God's on our side, not yours. As a child from a fervently anti-Catholic church background, I was taught that Catholics would go to hell, that the Pope was the Antichrist, that our version of Christianity was true, theirs false. Meanwhile, I'm quite sure that Catholics were being told exactly the same about Protestants. Each side saw the other as the enemy. So little wonder that John Lennon, steeped in this background, invites us in his song to imagine a world with no religion, nothing to kill or die for, people living life in peace. The massive sea change for Liverpool came when David Shepherd, the Anglican bishop, made friends with the Catholic bishop, Derek Warlock. And during those dark days of the 1970s and 80s, excuse me, their presence towered over the city, creating a wonderful united force for good, acknowledging that despite differences, each tradition shared equally in the life and mission of Christ in the world. In 2005, the Liverpool Echo commissioned a statue of the two men, which stands midway between the Catholic and the Protestant cathedrals, which happen to be situated either end of a single road, ironically called Hope Street. On a recent visit to the city, I went and took the opportunity to stand in between the two great men, hoping that something would rub off, I guess. It's not by coincidence, that Jesus pointed toward a deep interconnectedness based on generosity and love in the context of mission, the very activity that so easily divides with sectarianism and proselytization. Our world desperately needs signs of big-heartedness and inclusion, not simply between different branches of Christianity, but between people of goodwill in all the faith traditions. A few years ago, when a young soldier, Lee Rigby, was brutally killed in Woolwich by two Islamic extremists, the event was followed by hundreds of Islamophobic incidents across the country, one of which involved a far-right group assembling outside the mosque in York, making threatening anti-Islamic gestures. Rather magnificently, members of the Muslim community in York responded to this by inviting the demonstrators into the mosque for a nice cup of tea and a custard cream, followed by an impromptu game of football. Wow. A local politician spoke of the gesture as a proud moment in the history of the city, commenting, "I don't think I'll ever forget the day that the York Mosque tackled anger and hatred with peace and warmth, and I won't forget the sight of a Muslim offering a protester tea and biscuits with absolute sincerity." I can see Jesus smiling at this. Beautiful tea and biscuits religion, diffusing hatred and bigotry. That, dear friends, I can tell you, is definitely the kind of faith that I can believe in, whether it's lived out in a mosque or a church, a temple or a synagogue. And I leave you with two images that have lingered on our TV screens of late. The one of police officer Derek Chauvin kneeling on the neck of George Floyd until he was dead, and the other of Patrick Hutchinson, a campaigner for Black Lives Matter, rescuing a far-right protester who was injured and in danger of being trampled. If this was a Where's Jesus puzzle, I don't think it would be too hard to solve. The message I take from today's gospel reading is pretty straightforward, really. It's this, that small acts of kindness can actually be massively subversive and transformative. Freshly baked bread on the West Bank, tea and biscuits in a mosque, a helping hand to a supposed enemy at a demonstration, a cup of cold water to one of these little ones. Those who welcome you welcome me, and those who welcome me welcome the one who sent me. This, I believe, is the true spirit of the Jesus movement, which I, for one, would love to see revived. Amen.